Good evening. Welcome to the New School. Happy Leap Day. My name is Karen Kooni. I'm the director of the Venice Center for Art and Politics here at the New School, and a very proud and happy host on behalf of the New School of the Public Art Fund talks at the New School. We are thrilled and delighted to have Isa Genzken with us, and Isa is joined by Nicholas Baume, the director and chief curator of the Public Art Fund, Daniel Buchholz, and Randy Kennedy. It was actually in 2003 that the Public Art Fund talks at the New School began. They began in this particular auditorium with a lecture delivered by Thomas Hirschhorn. The auditorium was built in 1931 by Austrian architect Joseph Urban. It is a significant and widely recognized tribute to modernism in America, now an officially designated architectural landmark, as one of the very first buildings in the city dedicated to the international style. But Joseph Urban, the architect of the building, was more than just an architect. He was a man of many souls. Born in Austria in the late 19th century, he moved to the US in 1911, but instead of practicing architecture, became the first art director of the Boston Opera, and in 1914 moved to New York to become a set designer for the Metropolitan Opera and the Ziegfeld Follies, in fact. I mention this tonight since the auditorium, to my mind, provides such a rich and material testimony to diverse, and I don't mean necessarily contradictory, but diverse impulses, ranging from the theatrical with its Moorish style ceiling patterns that you see above you to the archaic, the egg shape of this particular space. With that, I would like to express my deep appreciation to the Public Art Fund and the formidable artists that they have brought to us, to the New School, whose voices resonate in this space. I'd like to thank Nicholas in particular. At the New School, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of Pamela Tillis, Director of Public Programs, and of Emily Donnelly, Manager of Programs and Administration at the Venice Center. My deep appreciation also, as always, goes to the Advisory Committee of the Venice Center. And with that, Nicholas Baume will now introduce the panel and the conversation. Thank you.
Karen, thank you so much for those warm words of welcome. We love working and partnering with the Vera List Center, with Karen and Pam and the team here at the New School, who do such an amazing job. And it's lovely to be reminded of the great history of this room, the architecture, and of course the great artists who have spoken here over many years. But tonight's turnout is nothing short of fabulous. Sold out. I see people standing at the back, and I think it's a great tribute to Isa that so many of you have joined us tonight. This is actually the second talk of our spring season. We heard from Adrian Villarojas last month, and then in April we're going to hear from Peter Fischli. And of course, we have the wonderful Fischli Weiss mural up on Houston Street right now in conjunction with the Guggenheim retrospective. But tonight is really a very special occasion. Isa does not often do this. In fact, I don't know that she's ever really participated in a discussion in New York, which is probably why so many of you are here. We, however, twisted her arm, and I think because she loves New York so much, she agreed to participate in tonight's panel discussion about her work. Joining us are Randy Kennedy, New York Times arts writer, who you'll remember interviewed Isa for a wonderful piece that was published in conjunction with her MoMA retrospective. And when I asked Isa, when this idea came up, who she would like to have this conversation with, she immediately said Randy Kennedy. And happily, Randy agreed. So we're delighted about that. Daniel Buchholtz is here, founder of Gallery Buchholz, founded in Cologne in 1986, and has been a leading and influential gallery in Germany really for the past 30 years, now also in Berlin and here in New York City. Isa is one of the most influential artists of her generation and really needs little introduction. She was born in Bad Oldesloe, Germany. I think she's probably the most famous person ever to be born in Bad Oldesloe, which is a town north of Hamburg. And she was born there in 1948 and lives now in Berlin, though she's kind of an honorary New Yorker too. We were lucky enough here to see the MoMA retrospective in 2013, and really to see then, I think, the incredible diversity and breadth of her work throughout such an interesting and varied career. She's also currently the subject of a major retrospective at the Stedelijk in Amsterdam, and has shown in countless major exhibitions all over the world. She's represented by Buchholz and also here in New York, David Zwirner. Now, as you, I'm sure, know, we're celebrating the launch and opening today, in fact, of Two Orchids, a really magnificent, spectacular public piece that Isa has installed at the entrance to Central Park in Doris Friedman Plaza. It's really a breathtaking work, and I encourage you all to see it if you haven't already had a chance. And fittingly, tonight's discussion is really going to focus on her public projects, which have been a really consistent interest of hers throughout her career. Many of her public projects have been realized, but many more have not, which is something that those of you who went to the Venice Biennial last year would have seen in a fabulous room filled with models of Isa's projects, which in fact also are now the subject of an important exhibition called Models for Outdoor Projects at the Bundeskunsthalle in Bonn. So don't miss that if you're traveling to Bonn. The format tonight is going to be very informal. We're going to share images of Isa's public projects, both realized and unrealized, thinking about how this body of work has evolved in relation to her broader practice, but also in her interest in architecture, in cities, and in the way we inhabit them. I think hopefully we'll also have a few minutes for audience questions at the end, but now I will join the panel and we'll start.
I thought that because of where we are now and where Isa's sitting in this very rare appearance, that it might be nice to start out talking about her, what you might describe as her great love affair, and that's with this city, which is a second city to her, and where she's been coming since she was in high school. And I thought maybe, Isa, if you could talk a little bit about your first trip to New York and about, I know you've talked about seeing skyscrapers and about the scale of those and about what the city did for you. And it would be nice to hear your memories from that first trip and about some of the first artists that you met here who were influential for you as friends and as artists.
Is this working? Yeah. Okay, I came here first. I was 16 years old. I could live at my aunt's. They were twins. They lived in New York, and they were stewardess. And they said to me, "You can always live in our apartment." It was on Lexington Avenue, And I came to New York and I thought, this is my city. And I love New York since that. Since then I'm coming like every year to New York. And I'm quite much older now than 16. So, yeah, I love New York. That's it, crazy city. I did a book about New York. It's called I Love New York, Crazy City. And
who was the first artist you met here and
yeah,
befriended?
it was Dan Graham.
It was Dan.
And I know him through Benjamin Buchholz. He was my boyfriend a long time ago. And so Dan could visit us in our apartment in Cologne in Germany. And through him, Benjamin Buchholz, I sort of met artists at that time, like Botas and Buren and who else? So personally, I got contact with them. And Yvonne Rainer, for example, she came to our house, and very good-looking woman. Yeah, and I love New York so much because of the skyscrapers here, the volume, you know, and I love really sculpture to do, and in me also public sculpture, because you can choose if you give you a space where to do something in public. You can go there, you can visit this place, and then you can make a photo of that place, and then you sit in your studio and thinking, what is missing there? And then you have an idea there, what is missing for the public, and then you don't want to make it not perfectly all right, but you want to do something people love, because something is missing there. Then you do something what is missing, so you do it. There are a lot of artists, when they do public art, they just go inside their studio and then they put something out of the studio and then they put it somewhere and then they double it 20 times or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I hate that, by the way.
I know you talked to me one time about scale and architecture, and you talked about having visited the pyramids and it being this powerful experience because of the shift in scale that happened. That you said you were there and you were disappointed because they seemed so small, and then the walking, it seemed like the scale increased out of proportion to the amount of space that you'd covered. And it seems like that sense of scale has always driven your architectural interventions and practices.
You know, I don't like so much if something is too monumental, you know, and the pyramids are, I was there, I saw them. From far away, they look very small. Mm-hmm. And when you go there more next to it, they get more large and more large. And I really like that experience, you know, mm-hmm. getting from small to larger. And mm-hmm. I like that. Mm-hmm.
Well, and with the two orchids at Central Park, I mean, they transform the scale of Central Park. The park looks smaller. It feels smaller. Or do you think about that as when you're putting monumental sculpture next to something, that it makes the thing next to it smaller? Or confuses someone's sense of scale?
It depends how the situation is. You know, sometimes it's better to do something bigger than the situation is, sometimes not. Mm-hmm. And I don't like artists who just put something monumental and there's no reason for it.
Mm-hmm. And do you, when you, as with your models, your architectural models, do you often choose the buildings that those projects will be around because of a love of the building, or alternately a building that you hate, that you feel like it has to have something else?
Yeah, that's how it works, you know. Somebody asks you to do something there or there, and then you go there and then you think, what is missing here?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a very ugly house. Like in Münster, it was a university. I did ABC. I did a kind of Los Angeles part of architecture there, and it was the 50s architecture, very ugly in Germany, and they kicked what I did. It was a public school for university, and the director didn't want the piece, and he got it away. So there was no reason, because the place was much better with it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And have some of these proposals been formulated because you knew they were provocations and that they would never, that the chances of them being realized were slim because they are provocations? They're either a provocation to the architect, or sometimes they're a provocation to the corporation that has the building, that builds the building.
You know, I really like...
And funny, in a way that they might not like.
You know, in a way I like communication, you know. I like to communicate with the architect and with the situation, and then with the people, of course, who are living there and walking there every day. And that's what I like about outside sculpture, because outside sculpture you get a place. Normally, if they build it, it will stay there. Then you get some money to do it, and then a factory builds the piece, so the money is not the real problem. But nowadays in art, money is much more a problem than it always was, because there's so bad art around, I think. And the money is really a problem, because this bad art is paid all the time, you know, because it's very fashion right now to buy art, and people to buy it, very often they don't have knowledge about art, so because it's so fashionable to buy art, they buy the worst stuff.
What of the architectural projects that you've wanted to do, that you've proposed, which ones are the ones you're the most disappointed that haven't been? Which one would you most want to see realized that hasn't been and might never be?
I don't know.
Maybe we should come back to the question after we've gone through some slides.
Yeah, that was my first outside project. It was in the garden in Cologne, and I really did this nice thing there, because the architecture there around it was so large and new, and so I did this little broken stuff there to sit inside, and I wanted to sit inside or to walk inside, but it was a very small sculpture for the garden.
Was that realized?
No.
Or why not?
I don't know.
And concrete was important for you fairly early on, because it was a material that was prevalent in post-war Berlin, but also because it was the guts of these. It was the the structure inside of these buildings that was never seen and that interested you?
You know, concrete is a material, you often think it's bad looking. So it looks sometimes very broken up, and after the war, Germany was completely broken up. You know, so I started with concrete to see how it will be working again. And that I did in Germany. I started it in Germany.
Isa, do you think
I
that...
didn't want to do any fashionable stuff, you know.
And how did people there receive that? I mean, because concrete probably represented to them something about dissolution or about the war. Was the concrete read as a material?
You know, these pieces I did in concrete, they were like spaces, and they were not so large. When you come close to it, it was kind of getting large and larger, you know. Mm-hmm. It got very kind of monumental. But from the beginning, when you could walk into a room, it's small pieces. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of broken, and you know, all this fragility they have. Concrete normally is not so fragile. Then I did it.
Mm-hmm. And this one wasn't realized because they were uncomfortable with it, or because it didn't happen?
No, they were the most famous artist they liked from Germany was Lüpertz, and he's such a worst artist. So I think, you know, awful. So I did this piece, and you know, maybe somebody came and said to them, "Don't do it." I don't know.
And what is this piece?
Yeah, this ABC, that was in Münster at what I talked about, the University of the Bibliothek. Ja, so sagt man doch das, Daniel? Library, University Library. And I thought it's like Los Angeles piece, you know, and they kicked it down. I don't know why.
In what ways were you reading this as was Los Angeles coming into this? These sort of monumental gates?
Yeah, and this the kind of thin columns, you know, mm-hmm. and the two windows upstairs, you know. Mm-hmm. And then the floor was like a shadow of it. The floor was like a shadow of that piece. So I made it from the floor, I did it up.
Mm-hmm. There was a certain pattern on the floor, which is mirrored.
Created by those shadows.
I guess it's also an example in the works from this period. It seems the architectural references are quite clear. The window, in this case, or concrete as a building material.
And it was just, wie sagt man das, war nicht ein Ganzes, war nur ein Ausschnitt, also nur.
Von was?
Ja, die Arbeit, diese Skulptur. The sculpture is like, it's not something which is completely, you know, you can get it in mind.
Isa, can use the microphone.
Okay. Yeah. This piece is something you can look at it, and then you can order it more high, or more going to the next part, you know. It's an Ausschnitt, that it's German. How do you say
how would that translate?
It's a detail.
Yeah.
A detail.
Yeah. And it's not monumental, as you see.
Right.
But also the title ABC is also refers to the Lesitsky
Yeah,
paper.
exactly.
And what? Oh, this is an unrealized piece, the fountain piece here from '87. Where would that have been?
I don't remember it.
It was for Bonn.
For Bonn. And again, this
it was a competition for an outdoor sculpture thing for. It has something to do with water, and she came up with the idea of a fountain. So it's like a silent water inside, but it was next to the Rhine River too. So it was a moving water, and the standing still water.
Mm-hmm. And this again was it's concrete.
And it's also concrete. This was, maybe I should say something to that. That was actually a gallery building in Cologne, and I had a gallery also in the time. It was our first show, and this was a new building by Ungers, the German architect. And Isa wanted to, for the opening show, exchange one window because she didn't like the grids of Ungers. But Ungers was so furious and was not allowing to do that she leaned the window inside of the gallery. There's a photograph of that. And the leaning window became later on an important thing for her. Like we see later on something that it's leaning on something, but you don't see.
Right.
And the window is anyhow an important thing for Isa. Everybody needs at least one window. She always said. And so that's a membrane between the inside and outside and all that. Yeah.
What's interesting because the ABC piece seems like it's sort of creating windows for no reason. That's architectural, if you like, just framing the view. And this is almost the opposite of kind of removing the window from an architectural context.
This is a piece, it's quite nice, I think. I put in a place in, where was it we went there? Rotterdam. There was a kind of large place, and I put all the houses together with one ring. And then they started to build this ring, they wanted to have it, then there was a woman, she said, this ring will make noise by the wind. So then they stopped doing it. So it was already done, and then because of this woman, and because this ring was making noise, she said. I mean, any car, so many things making noises.
It is because, in the winter it shrinks, and in the summer, the metal, and so we couldn't fix it really hard on the thing. It had to be a little kind of loose fixed, that it could breathe. Like the metal goes with the cold, got small, and that was creating. They were thinking that would create some noises, and then it was actually fabricated. The ring was done, but it was never then installed.
Made out of what material?
Steel, like iron, I think, iron.
And I made it as thin as possible. That was nice of this ring, I thought.
And how did you conceive of that ring uniting the buildings, or is that ring a kind of a window or a portal, kind of hovering over the buildings, leaning toward the buildings?
Yeah, it was like coming from the sky, something, like a ring flying into it, connecting all the architecture in that space, and I loved that.
did refer a bit on the ellipsoid and hyperbolus, but when they're sitting only on 2 points on the floor that are touching only like three things on a. How is all the idea of geometrical in the time? No?
I don't know.
This.
You know, I'm German, I'm sorry. My English is not so well, you know. But my thinking is okay.
Isa, tell us about this project, which I think is quite extraordinary.
This was a project I did for an autobahn to Amsterdam, and I was thinking of you see it from far when you are on the autobahn, you think, oh, now we are in Amsterdam. Now we see a large a door, like a part of a, wie heißt das denn?
The archway?
Nein, wie ein bisschen, ein Berg.
Yeah.
You know, because when you drive on the autobahn in that country, there's no mountains. So I put a part of a mountain there, and I put them on little sculptures there on top. So it's like nice.
They're almost floating, no? There's a heavy mountain floating on the gate of the.
But it ends up reading as a kind of a rock, like a rock gate,
Exactly.
like a mountainous, like one you drive through in Greece or somewhere when you're on a road.
Yeah.
And then it's colorful too. There's
Inside,
paint on it. It's like,
yeah, there's always something in the nature which is nature.
And is the color meant to evoke, you know, like the kind of monumental rock formations like that you see in Arizona or in the West?
I did it with, wie heißt es, Gips und
Plaster.
Plaster. And I did it with, wie heißt es mit Plaster? To make it clay. Also mit
Clay?
Clay, yeah, and that is the color of it.
But this represents like plants or something. You know, like a mountain would not stay white anyhow in the nature. You know, so that was more like a.
Right. And this was not realized.
No.
No, it was
30
meters high.
I did another proposal then. I thought it would be nice in Amsterdam to do a big tulip, because in Amsterdam tulips are very famous flowers. And I did a piece for flowers at the Autobahn, and they were like moving, always wind is coming, they were moving, and of course people from Amsterdam, they said, wow, these flowers, now we are at home, you know.
But they didn't realize it because they think they were making fun of them, right?
It doesn't sound like you were making fun of them. No, it sounds like a generous gesture to the weary driver. And Isa, where do you think this this feeling that seems to often animate these projects, where it's this feeling that buildings, structures, urban structures are, for a lack of a better word, sort of lonely, like they need to be connected by something.
Yeah.
They need something that's not structural to put them together, and that seems to be a line through so many of the things that you do. They need to be touched by something to bring them together.
Exactly.
Why do you think that became important to you?
I think that people should touch more each other than they do. They're too cold right now. So I one time I came to a gay bar and I said, is that now fashion that you don't touch each other anymore? They said, wow, can you please touch us? And I said, yes. And they said, can you do it another one? Another time I said, yes, I can.
So these are sort of signs writ large of that we need to get together a little more often.
I think so.
Right.
So, what about this this piece?
It wasn't realized. It was also in Münster. It was a sport thing, you know. You could make sport on it. You can.
Like gymnastics.
Yeah,
You leap over.
Yeah. And was in front of a Gericht. Was heißt das?
Judge.
Yeah.
A court. Courthouse. The courthouse.
In front of a courthouse. And why athletic high bars for a courthouse?
High bar is the name. It's called Rec in German, the high bar. Yeah, why?
You know, sometimes I do things, I even don't think about it so much, I just do it, you know.
It refers a little bit on the terrace kind of architecture from the building also. So
Yeah.
that it was kind of referring to that also,
Right.
I think.
This is an outside piece I did in Brussels, with my gallery there in Brussels. And on the balcony, there's a balcony upstairs, and I did all the windows from upstairs to up, the same size, and then it was like, it's called camera, and when you look at it, you see through the whole Brussels, you see it through a frame.
So it was called camera.
Yeah, camera.
So it was a leaning window, but then, it framed a panoramic view, you know, like a...
It's still there.
It ends up being a lens, looking like a lens, operating as a lens.
But also when you go in the street, it almost looks like fall down, you know, so it has movement also.
Mm-hmm.
And it is realized.
Is the gallery still there too?
Yeah, Mertrio, they call it. Nice gallery. Yeah, that's from upstairs.
So this was for Boston, I think, yeah?
A maquette for Boston for a Holocaust situation. What I did was doing a train situation in between with trees, so you can walk inside and you have the feeling of a tree walking and windows also. So it's the opposite of Holocaust trains where they did people inside trains. And I think it's a good memory about that time.
And you could walk through
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
through between the trees,
Mm-hmm.
through the corridor.
Yeah.
And why wasn't that one realized?
I have
Just
no idea.
Logistical problems?
And they invited more than 100 artists for that.
I don't even know what the winning piece was. I can't
Me
think.
too. I don't know.
They should have done this.
Have you ever had a thought about that being, about that ending up somewhere else? I mean, was it completely site-specific to there, or could you realize it somewhere else?
No, it was just because of this situation I did it.
It was it's a very busy street in Boston, and then she wanted to make the silent or like the quiet situation in the middle. And the trees are actually really big trees, so this was a really big idea.
Right.
I mean, big as
Right.
So this is interesting. You have a few works that make this connection between buildings or
I
people?
connected like 3 buildings. This was student houses. I don't know where it was.
Canada.
Canada, okay. And I just connected them with a string, and they showed it, I think, not for a long time, but they did it.
It was temporary, realized. And the negative space of the 2 buildings, if you can see it, shows like a T-shirt.
T-shirt for students.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorites. It's just because it's the economy of means. It's amazing how it makes you look at those buildings, which aren't much.
Uh-huh.
But how did you get the string from one side to the other?
I think professionally it's possible.
I guess the only worry would be that someone would try to do a man on a wire act across there.
Yeah, this was a project. I was asked for Frankfurt to do something for a bank, and I choosing 2 banks, and I connected them also with a string, and I took ein Betttuch darüber.
A piece of laundry.
Yeah. So
A bit of laundry.
yeah, so it was kind of something against the banks, because, you know, connecting some banks with a Betttuch, you know.
Was it dirty laundry?
It gets dirty if you have seen it for a long time.
And how did they respond to that?
They didn't do it, of course.
They didn't respond. This is the one we were talking about earlier. That's still in place.
It's there. The architect was behind. He was against that piece because it's more high than his building is. So he was completely against my piece. But you know, the people who built this piece said, no, we want this piece. And also the city, Bielefeld, says, we like that piece, we don't want it bad and get it away. So this piece is still there.
But it also seems like it's as if the building is regarding itself, and it draws attention to the building.
Yeah, it's called mirror.
I mean, I could see how, because it's taller than the actual building, that he would be somewhat put out by that. But it gives it something else.
This is a subway station I could do in Duisburg, and I did it with Gerhard Richter. We could do the whole subway station, and he had 1 floor and I had 1 floor, and one of us had the entrance one there and I one there. So we did a good public art there, I think so, because people were coming there to that station every day, and they could see it every day, and they could think about it, and I love that piece very much.
Is it still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like the forms is really like the like an ellipsoid, like the early drawings from her. The color, you know, it goes like smaller.
So is it metal panels?
Yeah.
Enamel
Yeah.
panels.
And this was the first rose?
Yeah. Mr. Bora, who owns all the magazines in Germany, he asked me to do something in front of his house there in Baden-Baden. And Baden-Baden is a very flowerful city, so I thought, do a flower there. And I took a rose. And that's where I did the rose the first time. Now New York has a rose at the MoMA, and I'm proud of that.
And did you, from the beginning, think about flowers as kind of, exhausted cliches, but also things that we still find beautiful? And
I think people love flowers.
Right.
From the beginning on, when you are alive and when you are dead, they love flowers.
Isa, was your idea with this first rose to do something hyper-realistic? Did you want it to look...
Yeah, I wanted to that it looks like a gene mistake. So it's very realistic. It's 8 meters high. And when you see it, you think, it's a rose. It can't be a rose. And you go too much to see it. And it looks very, very realistic.
Were people surprised, given that your earlier work, a lot had been more minimalist, geometric, abstract?
Yeah. It was the first thing I did. Not so abstract. No, for example, the door, the dornen, yeah. How do you call it?
The thorn.
With thorns.
With this rose, I thought about people who walk there. So I put them 2 meters high, the first ones. So you can really walk there and you cannot get in touch with this.
This is why Isa's a very good public artist. She thinks about these things.
But did it also interest you that when it's next to a building, that it then scrambles your thought about the size of that building, because it plays with scale, makes it look like a dollhouse?
No, this building was not the Bauhaus.
No, a dollhouse. A doll's. It makes it look like a miniature house.
Ach so. I don't know.
The rose has, of course, a lot of meanings. Yeah, in art history too, so that's also for socialism or, for all this kind of things, but rose means also. So that was also an attention of that. But yes, I think that she told me once that she liked the idea of that it's not only the big flower, that the environment around appears smaller,
Right.
So this rose was stainless steel, so it was a reflection of the Umgebung, of the surrounding. It reflected the surrounding a lot, green surrounding there. So it was kind of nice, I think.
And this next piece is, I guess, kind of shows how you also would go back and forth from different bodies of work.
Yeah.
As you still do.
Is this one where I know that you had a fascination with the John Hancock building in Chicago, which has these super prominent cross beams.
Yeah, but there's also a building in New York with this
on 57th Street.
And this is concrete?
Yeah. It's in front of a sport. swimming sport place.
And do you want it to be read as a piece of architecture? It feels more like a piece of architecture than a sculpture.
Yeah, I wanted that it looks very strong, you know, like this. If I would have it like this, it would be collapse very easily. But if it's like this, diagonally, it doesn't get so easy to get down. Yes, this piece I did in Münster for the sculpture projects in Münster. Kaspar König does this always, and he invited me to do something there, and I did a full moon, and he liked that piece, and I said to him, the full moon has always to be lighted from the inside, so it's always lightening, the full moon. Then Kaspar König said to me, it's very good for Münster, because then they don't have sex anymore.
Because it's too bright outside, you can see people.
But the idea was also that during the day it's a lantern, and then when it comes in the night, then you see only the lit up ball, so that becomes then really a moon. You know, you didn't see the pole anymore in the night.
And with some of these, it seems like you're hinting at sort of a German romanticism. Back to that, there's these things that feel a little bit not sublime, but certainly
we have
unabashedly romantic.
We have Caspar David Friedrich, the painter. He did very often full moons in his paintings. I love his paintings very much. So maybe this influence came to my sculpture here. Maybe. What was it?
Where is this?
I don't remember.
Belgium. In the Don't Done Museum in front of it.
Sorry?
It's the Don't Done Museum in Belgium. And she had a show there, and then they asked her to do that. Also a window. It's actually, you can see it maybe there. You see it there. It's also half leaning against nothing, like leaning in the air. But it could be also a stretcher for a painting.
I like it because it's tilted, you know. It could always, you have the feeling it could always falling away, falling down, but it does not. It's technical, made very good.
It's interesting that you would go from a piece like the cross structure that's all about stability and kind of structural integrity to then something that has this kind of levitation almost and defying gravity.
But it also seems like it would invite you to lie down near it and look through it, because it vaults you up, because it's lean like that. It vaults you up into the sky. You're looking. It makes you look up at the sky.
Yeah, it's true.
If you have the courage to lie there.
What's this piece?
This is one I'm not familiar
interesting. Propellers?
Wie sagt man dazu?
That was a competition also for the called Windenergie. This is the big German thing with the propellers now. Then for the new energy thing, and she was also invited to do something with that, and she just moved the propellers up so that it's not the wind cannot do anything anymore with that.
It's too high for the wind to be.
Yeah, it's also
effective.
because instead of like catching the
Oh, I
wind,
see.
it cannot
Right.
catch
It
the wind
won't
anymore.
turn it
So
very much.
no energy anymore. Energy comes only from the sculpture, not anymore from the wind.
And this one, if we're talking about scale, I mean, this seems to be, these are artificial trees that then make these two buildings look tiny, just small, like they look like models.
These are two trees I did for Brussels, and they are out of metal, these trees, and in this street there were no trees at all, so I thought trees is good for this situation. And I liked it because there are two, not one tree. So that's why I did it.
It's like the orchids. You have two orchids.
Yeah.
But maybe it's interesting to know that there was out of metal, special metal that you found in the harbor in Brussels. That's all this. It was like almost garbage out of metal,
Yeah.
and took that material, and then built trees out of it.
And
So they make even also a bit noise because it was loose, kind of. That was the idea.
And were those supposed to be cypress trees, like the kind that you often see in
Italy?
In graveyards,
Ah, yeah.
that often line graveyards? Was there a thought to that at all?
Because of the shape.
The cypress. Sorry, I'm just curious.
Don't look at me.
I'll pass on that one, I guess.
There are more trees in this image, but
But the trees are only
the trees were there, right?
That was a proposal for a studio window for an artist. But they didn't do it.
It reminds you of a mansard window, like
Yeah.
in a Paris, studio. It's actually I don't know if you can see that it's half. It's also glass, and the half is open, and the small windows represents like the air kind of thing.
Yeah, this was a nice piece for Berlin. A bridge is there, and they wanted to have a new, wie heißt das denn auf Deutsch, auf Englisch?
What is the size of the bridge?
The railing or
The railing.
Yeah.
The railing.
And I did some music stuff. It's called, wie heißt es denn?
It's from an opera. It's called Das ist die Berliner Luft, Luft, Luft.
Yeah,
So it's the musical notes
Yes.
yeah,
from the song,
yeah,
popular song
Yeah.
in Berlin.
yeah. But they didn't do it.
And you can only read it really from the boat. So it's not as a passage, like not as a walking. So you can see it only from the riverside. You can read the score.
I love this project.
Yeah. This
what-
was a project for a house at where you have holidays, at the sea. And I did this project together with an architect, and we did a small skyscraper at the sea and giant curtains flying in the wind. Yeah.
Was it commissioned by someone? Did they?
No, the Deutsche Bank bought the model of it.
There was a show in the Frankfurter Kunstverein called an exhibition called Urlaub, Holiday was the title of the show, and that was a project just for Montauk here for Long Island, because she said like also holiday houses could be like tall and like skyscrapers and not only like a bungalow kind of shape.
And in this, the curtains come from the inside of the house to the outside of the house, and the wind from the ocean is constantly blowing them around the house.
Yeah.
And you don't have any real control over the...
Not really.
Right.
It depends how the weather is.
It depends how the weather is. This is my favorite, and as yet unrealized.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Right. Can you say why was this building interesting to you to turn into essentially a stereo? What? And that's here.
I know. I know this building. But it was, wie heißt das nochmal auf Englisch, in der Sache der Architektur?
Philip Johnson.
Ja, Philip Johnson Building. Aber wie heißt das nochmal, als die Moderne umkippte?
Postmoderne.
Postmoderne. So I didn't like that building so much. It was too much postmodern to me.
But you liked Philip Johnson. You was just
yeah,
in shock because
Philip
of that
Johnson
building.
a lot. But this building, I was thinking, not really so interesting. But then I started to think about it. What could I do? Then first I had an idea to put something in the hole of the building.
What would have gone in the hole?
A little piece of architecture.
A little piece of architecture would have gone in it?
Yeah, that's
Shaped
what I
like
want.
what?
Shaped like a piece of mountain. I don't know. I never got the invitation, so I don't know. So then I thought about my world receivers I did. They always have two antennas. So I said to myself, it's a Sony building. They have world receivers. So I had this idea to have two antennas on top of it. And I said to myself, that would save the architecture.
And was Johnson ever aware of this proposal? Did he ever see it or talk to you about it?
I don't know. I don't know him. I have no idea.
And was that ever move toward any kind of a realization?
No, I don't think so.
But this one was.
Yeah. This is it was in Austria. I put an ear of a woman. Yeah, it's a nice project.
And you've had a long-standing sort of formal fascination with ears and have done work based on the ear. And when did that begin? And what was your interest in the shape or the metaphor of the ear?
An ear is something very important, of course, for listening to something. And the shape is very nice. I think I was taking photos of woman ears, and when I asked in New York, could I please take a photo of your ear? They said, if it's not my face, you always can do a photo of my ear. So that was nice, because when you are in the street and you ask somebody to make a photo of your face, most of the people would say no, or maybe, or what. But with the ear, they always say, okay, okay.
So this was realized, I think, yeah?
And what is the hair made out of, in this case?
Was heißt das nochmal?
Oh, bamboo sticks.
Bamboo, and it was a hair growing as they want is the title.
Right.
And was 3 times realized. This is the small pavilion next to the Volksbühne in Berlin. an artist, Josef Strau, was running it in the time and invited Isa to do something in the pavilion, and she just put the hairs on top, and so the pavilion became the base, or became a sculpture too.
Mm-hmm.
This is a flower piece outside. It was from Munich, and it was okay. I don't want to bother you with all this stuff.
Or just one aside, when you were talking earlier about taking pictures, I remember that you did a series in the 80s here where you took a huge series of photographs of musical instruments in the windows of music stores in the village, and also pictures of bands playing where you focused only on the instruments.
Yeah.
And those have never been widely published.
Dan, you showed them.
Right, I've seen a few. You ever thought about publishing those as a whole series or a book? They've strangely remind me of Dan Graham's Homes for America.
Dan Graham was so nice. He always called me when I was in New York. Oh, there's a concert tonight. Please, let's go there and take your photo with you. And then I made photos, and then I was listening to music at that time, and the DNA, and I don't know, all these groups, we went almost every day to a group of music, and that was very, very good for me to see that in New York.
Mm-hmm. And an interesting thing about those is you can't tell who's playing. It's all from the chest down and the thighs up. It's it's the instruments and sometimes the amps, and there's not a way to identify them.
No, if you are an expert of music instruments, of course you can, but I'm not an expert.
And why didn't you ever publish those as a whole series, as a body of work?
Sometimes I work a lot, I'm really working a lot in my life, and sometimes this was not so important for me than to make a show out of it. Mm-hmm. And Daniel did a show and showed these photos.
No, I know we're kind of running short on time and want to make sure we can also have a couple of audience questions, but let's see if there are any other projects that you want to speak about.
That was for Braunschweig, and it was bridges from trees, and she just said paint them in phosphorescent paint so that they're glowing in the night. So during the day there was just like silvery looking, and in the night there was really like lightening up. That was for the German Pavilion in Venice, and she made that construction around the building, so that you don't know if it's ready, is it under construction, all this kind of. Maybe you want to say something to that?
I thought it was a nice show I did in Venice Biennial. I had the whole German Pavilion there. Mostly they have 2 or 3 artists to do something there. I had the whole pavilion, and I was very proud to do it. And I tried to do my best there.
But it is also that a Nazi architecture building, so you wanted to
I
cover it also.
destroyed that a little bit.
And it was covered in construction scaffolding.
And now we're back in New York at the new museum.
Yeah.
And that was there for several years.
And then it moved to the MoMA.
Right.
And back to Münster.
Münster, yeah. 3 times I was invited for Münster. ABC, this Los Angeles piece, and then the full moon, and then I did this in front of a church in Münster, and it was about children and about, wie heißt das, Regenschirme.
And there's 12 sculptures. Was it related to the Station of the Cross? Because it was in front of the
Kannst du
church?
mir das mal ein bisschen übersetzen?
And
Forget about it.
this is like tent material, tent poles.
Yeah, it was actually interesting because Kaspar Koenig, who was organizing that, said like it's impossible, people will steal it in the night or something, but actually nobody stole something. So it was actually people add something on it. And yeah, the children represent also a bit of child abusement also, what we had in churches sometimes and all that. So, and when I was there at the opening, and then people was really, in the between them, and looking around, and they came also with their children, and then they mingled it all in, and that you could not see anymore what was real and was not. So that was kind of radical outdoor
And
sculpture.
Was it supposed to look sort of like an encampment, or what was the thought of how that should be read? They kind of look a little bit like people camping out there, or not fleeing, but on the road, or some kind of.
Thinking about camping also. I mean, Münster is a camping city. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. Let's move on to ground zero here.
Okay.
So you had proposals for ground zero?
Yes. You can see them. I wanted to do a park instead of new buildings. I wanted to do buildings also, but more than 2, and more than you go through the park, you will find buildings where you can buy something to eat, or a restaurant, or you can you can go swim there. And so something which is very good for people to walk there. So it's a park, I thought, instead of a new building in a way.
And one was like a church, one was a hospital, one was a fashion store, one was a discotheque.
Yeah.
Another clothesline.
Yeah. Where was that?
And why is this
Graz.
dedicated to Michael Jackson?
I love Michael Jackson.
As good a reason as any.
Is that images of Michael Jackson on the clothing, or the sheets, or?
Yeah.
On back to MoMA.
Yeah, that was a proposal I did for the MoMA. They asked me to do something outside of the MoMA, so I did this proposal, and it's called Children Filming. And I'm there with my mother, and I like a baby with her, crying, and then yeah, that was a nice proposal, I think.
Oh, this is
This is a new thing for Münster. We are not sure if it will be built yet.
Realized, yeah. And it's
so it's like the Macy's Day Parade, but
In Münster.
in Münster.
And who is the character?
I forgot.
Me too.
It's quite a
The idea is to
diabolical.
have the real balloons from Macy's, to lend the balloons from Macy's, whatever it is it's Snoopy or this one, it could be also another one.
Right.
And then you would have seen, Fifth Avenue is like huge, but then when it comes to Münster, then of course.
Because the streets are so narrow,
Yeah.
it would be almost sandwiched in there.
Yeah.
And it would just stay there permanently.
No, it's just it's like for the opening, like for the
just for the
parade,
opening.
and then the sports fine from Münster, whatever's carrying them or something, because it needs at least 20 people to carry the balloon, otherwise it's floating in a way.
Right.
And finally, the orchids.
This is now the last work of outside sculpture I did, and I'm very proud now how it looks. And it looks sensitive, and it doesn't look too proud, like sometimes artists do try to do outside, too proud, too big, too large. And this piece is not too big and not too large. I think it's nice.
I love how it takes, you see it very clearly. It really is a strong piece, even from far away, but it's so delicate. The two stems of orchids that just emerge out of the ground, such a tiny footprint for a monumental sculpture. It's incredibly light.
Uh-huh.
And also the thought that the orchids can't support themselves. They have to have these sticks that they're tied to, so they seem very fragile.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're sort of at the end of the images here, and I know we wanted to at least have a moment for questions from the audience. Maybe if we get the lights for the house, that's great. And I think we have some microphones here. And did I see a hand up for a question here? Can you put your hand up if you'd like to ask a question? A full house, but no questions. Here's one.
Hi. I was wondering how you see your works of art experientially at night. Is lighting these sculptures at night as important as the daytime experience?
How they're seen at night. Whether you think about lighting them.
I think at night they look.
Use the microphone.
I hope at night they look nice. Especially with light at night. Some stars will be on the sky, so it could be nice.
But you don't want to have them artificially light?
No. I would like the way they are. Not like a film star putting light on it. No. Like it what it is.
Is there another question? Yes, down here in the front.
I was wondering if you could talk about emptiness in your sculpture, because I was struck by the work in the 80s, how there were these voids and openness, and how over the years in New York we've lost a lot of empty spaces that you seem to be capturing in your work.
Erzähl mir bitte.
Es geht um die leeren Stellen oder die leeren Flächen oder so, also um die leeren Räume.
Was ist damit?
Ja, das weiß ich auch nicht genau.
I don't have an answer. Because I always try my best to fill up emptiness, and if emptiness is not there, I don't fill up anything. So what is your question?
I guess is that there are these voids in the work that even though you framed space, you also left it empty to some degree, and so there seemed to be interest in emptiness, or a comment about emptiness.
Yeah, the work camera, for example, in Brussels, the leaning,
Yeah,
that was actually...
most of them, even the first garden sculpture, even the heavy concrete ones, had this kind of enveloping and emptiness.
Nicht verstanden.
She doesn't really understand the question. Was machen wir denn?
Maybe you can answer.
I think it's a fabulous question.
Yeah, I think so too, by the way.
I mean, it's an interesting question because in a way it sort of begs the question of what is emptiness, because as soon as you frame emptiness, it's fullness in a different way. So it seems like Isa plays with this lightness and weight from one body of work to another. But there's always, I mean, I feel like somehow lightness always wins, even with the massive, stone archway in Amsterdam on the Autobahn. It's held up on these delicate little feet, so it becomes this levitating mass.
Well, it also seemed to me like so often the pieces were making reference to actual buildings, and so they did have this open interior because they were walls the same way a building encloses empty space, or they read to me that way anyway, as having elements of a building.
Did we have another question?
It's a nice room here, I think.
Hello. Good evening. I have a question. You said you love New York City, and I'm kind of curious. Is there a place in New York City where you would want to do something? I'm over here. The other side.
Isa,
okay. I'm here.
He's over
here. But that's okay. I can talk. I'm curious. Is there a place in New York City? You said you love New York City. If there is a place in New York City where you would want to do something, and if so, what would it be?
If somebody would ask me to do something in New York, I would just say at the river, because New York is like a city is around surrounded by a river. So I would love to do something at the river, because I'm from Hamburg. Basically, Hamburg is a very river view city. So that's my first answer.
So it sounds like you've given us an excuse to have Isa back.
Sure.
In the future. Now she's done Central Park. We know we'll have to get to the East River or the Hudson River. But I think for now, I really just want to thank Isa so much for spending this time. And Randy and Daniel, thank you so much.